Welcome to the Western Wisconsin Sports Podcast. I'm Jeremy Nygaard, joined by Jordan Lehman. Jordan, how are you?
Doing well. This is Tuesday the 9th, so following the big week of Blackhawk TV broadcasts and Baldwin Woodville basketball, both boys and girls, mostly boys. It's good. It's been nice to have a couple nights off, kind of look at things from a top view a little bit, looking at the brackets, kind of thinking about the way the playoffs could play out, and should be fun. I was looking today at all five divisions and boys. We can start with boys, I guess. And there's some teams around here that have they always did have a shot. We've talked about them a lot, but I think there's some teams that have they should be confident, and I'm confident that they will be in the state tournament.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're going to do today. We're just going to preview the playoffs. So the girls' playoffs actually start tonight with regional quarterfinal matchups, and then the boys start a week from tonight with regional quarterfinal matchups. The process is going to be pretty straightforward. There's going to be 3 rounds of regional games that finish on that first Saturday. Regional champs then will be reseeded within their 4-team section, and then sectional champs will go to state. So we can start with boys. Do you want to just start with D1 and go down the list?
Sure. Yeah. Well, looking at, I kind of focused on our area.
Right, me too.
And, I think when you look at the sectional 1 in Division 1, obviously it's a well represented by the Big Rivers Conference. And I think River Falls, I think their biggest match, obviously Menominee's not a bad team. But I think Hudson's going to take care of Chippewa, and then the regional final should be a really good game. Obviously they split this season, Hudson and River Falls. And so obviously Hudson understands how to beat them, how to handle their length. And it'll be Johnson. It'll be Johnson, and then the guard from Hudson. I feel like that's what it's going to come down to. And from there, I don't think La Crosse Central is who they have been. I would pick, because if La Crosse Central were to come out of that region below them, I think they might be the lower seed, or maybe it depends on how they seed River Falls. But I just don't know if Spash, De Pere, or La Crosse Central, because I do think they will beat Memorial. I'm just not sure that any of them, on River Falls on a good night, I'm not sure if they can topple the Wildcats. I could be wrong, but
yeah. So River Falls has been really, really good this year. They've got, I believe, 2 losses on the season, 1 to Memorial early, and then 1 to Hudson. So both teams that have beat them are obviously in their section. So I was just looking at their path. They're going to have to beat the winner of Hudson Chippewa Falls, and they've handled Chippewa Falls both times. Not looking past the Menominee Superior game, but the first big game for River Falls is going to be that regional final. And like you said, is La Crosse Central the team that they have been before? It's really hard to say. I think they've only played 8 games, so they've played well in the games that they've played, but they haven't played a ton. So they're going to have to go through their path to the Kohl Center, which isn't really the Kohl Center, is going to have to go through more than likely Hudson, who's beat them, potentially Eau Claire Memorial, who's beat them, or La Crosse Central, who has historically been very, very good. And then De Pere is another team that is pretty highly regarded in that section. So, obviously that's the team in our area to watch in D1. And obviously Zach and I talk quite frequently, but I hadn't checked and seen just how many games they'd won in a row until today.
Mm-hmm.
They've been playing some really good basketball from a win-loss perspective. So that's certainly the team that will be focused on, and a team that certainly has a chance to make the run all the way down to the state tournament day.
Right. Right. And to kind of recap that for listeners, what is that state tournament day going to look like? Obviously the conventional Thursday, Friday, Saturday of years past at the Kohl Center. What's that going to look like
So it
this
sounds like
season?
there's going to be a couple of different places hosting, and there's going to be day like a Friday, Saturday where you go at one location. You can go semifinal, semifinal, final later in the day. So the season is going to culminate with teams playing 2 games in the same day uh, for the gold ball, essentially. So I believe lacrosse is one of the locations, and I didn't look if Oshkosh I think might be another one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's either that or Stevens Point. I can't remember.
Yeah,
I can
so
look it up.
um, that's going to look different, but the way that they've worked it out is that they should all be televised, um,
Hmm.
and they'll just kind of stagger the start and end time so that they'll go from one location to another one, and then while that other game's being played, they'll have the opportunity to clean up the facility and get ready for the next one. So um, that's going to be, for D1. I don't know if it'll be, where the location will be. I think that might be determined when the field's determined, to try to keep travel shorter. Um, but certainly River Falls is the team in D1 that we'll be keeping our eyes on.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were correct. It's Oshkosh, the Menominee Nation Arena. Um, and I believe that's going to be 4 and 5 divisions, 4 and 5. Um,
Have they
but yeah, I
announced
mean,
that? I didn't think they announced.
well, they announced it for girls, so I'll hold back on the boys. But I believe they announce lacrosse for boys.
I thought they announced the same locations, but hadn't announced what divisions would go where.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just assumed lacrosse would be 1 through 3. But obviously that could be wrong.
Yeah.
But looking at D2, obviously there's a couple regions there that we're really familiar with. We know a lot of their players. We know a lot of the coaches. What sticks out to you in those first 2 regions in Section 1, D2 with BW Altoona and that kind of
Yeah.
gang?
So in my opinion, region wise, the second region is where is the heavier region. Uh, I think Rice Lake, if they combine these to have a 10-team region, Rice Lake is probably a 4. Um, and then BW is probably a 5. Ashland Ellsworth are 6, 7, and then Amory, Osceola, Hayward are 8, 9, 10. So certainly the Rice Lake is heavily favored in Section 1, um, Region A, but not necessarily a team that's going to really enjoy probably playing on Alaska in the sectional semis, and it probably won't be close. Um, Medford then would get the winner of Section B, which includes Altoona, Somerset, and Richmond, Baldwin, Woodville, and Ellsworth. We got a front row seat to watching BW play exceptional basketball over the last handful of days, uh, where they've beat Somerset at home. Um, they beat Ellsworth with a really really good second half. Uh, they didn't play great against Osceola, but got that win. And then Saturday night in a thriller beat Prescott. Um, and so it'd be hard to argue that there's any team in that region playing basketball better than Baldwin Woodville. Um,
Mhm.
Altoona is kind of in a tailspin, and I just found out that Braden Turk, their leading scorer, my nephew, um, has a little bit of a wrist deal going on. So
Mm.
I think he's missed a couple games. Sounds like he should be back for their first round game. But there really hasn't been a team, especially at the top there, to separate themselves. Somerset could very easily beat Richmond and come out of that region. We've seen Somerset at their best, um, but we've also seen Somerset at far from their best, where they're not beating a lot of teams at all. So that there's going to be 4 games in that region that could really go either way. And I don't think that that's very common, especially in this format where you just get 5 teams that are close together and you group them. But if you told me Altoona gets knocked out in the second round, that wouldn't shock me. If you told me Altoona wins the regional final and plays well in the section, that wouldn't shock me. And you could say the same for Somerset. You could say the same for Richmond. I don't see Ellsworth getting out of the region. But Mason Anderson is an excellent basketball player, and
Yeah.
he could just do his thing on any given night and win a basketball game.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're completely right. That would be the strongest of the top 2 regions, in my opinion, overall. Rice Lake is accustomed to playing better teams, which will help them. That's customarily helped teams like McDonald Central in the playoffs, where they've gone to state with, I believe, 1 year close to double-digit losses when they dropped down to D5 after playing Altoona, Fall Creek, those kind of schools. But no, looking at those, like for Region 2 with BW and Somerset and Ellsworth, obviously it's fun as a BW fan to watch what they did last week, and hopefully they continue to do this week. But none of those games were blowouts in the same way. I mean, even the Ellsworth game, obviously the Prescott game, buzzer beater, Somerset game, close down the wire, all really good wins. And I say the Ellsworth game's a good win just because of what Mason Anderson can do when he's healthy. But as fun as it was, there's also a lot of reason to believe that the second round, per se, of those kind of games coming up here should be just as tight. Obviously, they're not going to play Prescott again. But let's say they go on the road this week and beat in Richmond or compete really well. There's no reason to think that the playoff game won't be just as competitive. So they're a team that I'm going to be rooting for. Obviously, we know a ton of the kids, and they're a team that absolutely should believe that they have a real shot to come out of it. I think when I look at the whole section, I think Medford is really tough, and I think Onalaska is really, really tough. So I think it's kind of a tale of two. I think getting to the sectional final would be a huge feat for whoever comes out of BW's region. But I do think Medford and Onalaska, obviously, if they're the 1 and the 2, they're the ones that I think Medford has 2 losses and Onalaska's a power. But no, it should be fun. I think the region to be most excited about would be Region 2, just because the regional final is going to be something special, because it's going to be teams that probably have seen each other, or if not, have a ton of like opponents, or at least have a historic, like, obviously this is going to be regional final, but like I think about BW's rivalry with Altoona during the 2000s, and then BW's rivalry with Rice Lake during the latter half of the middle of the latter half of 2000s, like seeing Rice Lake in the playoffs over and over. So it should be fun. It should be fun, but I do think Onalaska and Medford will take care of business. They just present a lot of problems. And for D3, obviously we know St. Croix Central really well. This is a hot take, but I think they'll beat Cameron by 15 or more points. I think Cameron's a really nice team. But I don't know if there's a ton of parity this year between the top of the middle border and the top of the Heart of North. I'm not convinced that there's a ton of parity there. One reason is I knowing a couple of Cameron's pieces, because I do think it's between those two. I think
I'd agree.
I don't see Aquinas or Neilsville giving St. Croix Central trouble. I don't know that that there's a kid on Cameron's team or any team in Division III other than the obvious Racine St. Kate's, that Central can't just go head for head and we still have more. Like, for example, Austin Weiss of Cameron and Richie Murphy of Cameron are their dudes. And I can see Gabe Seiler holding Richie Murphy to under 15 points. And I can see Kelson Klin or Jackson Pettit holding Austin Weiss to under 15 points. I don't know. That's my one hot take, I guess, that nobody should care about or respect. But I do feel like we've watched a lot of St. Croix Central. And when they have things going the right way, which they are right now, I mean, they're holding people to not very many points and they're still scoring. I'm just not sure that there's really anything that stands in their way that'll come close unless they play poorly.
Yeah, and I think for Cameron too, like if you look at, they've won double-digit games in a row, but they most recently beat Northwestern by 1 on Saturday. When they last played Cumberland a couple weeks ago, they beat Cumberland by 6. So there's obviously some. Cameron's going to have to. They're going to play a team that knows them well in the region. Northwestern's already moved on because Spooner forfeited their boys and their girls, I saw. So I'm guessing they've just kind of shut Winter Sports down. So Cameron's more than likely to get Barron, who has played them relatively tough, lost by 11 in their meeting, and then play again next week, or this in 2 days. So I mean, Cameron's got a path to get there. I'd expect them to get there. As far as Central's region goes, St. Croix Falls, they'll play St. Croix Falls, and I would expect them to beat them. And then how do you seed those teams? Like I would guess Central Cameron are 1-2, and they'd play in the sectional final. Is Aquinas going to just beat the crap out of teams? It's hard to say. Sometimes they just do, but I don't think they're as good as they have been. And then in the one with Neilsville too, it's hard to say how that all plays out. But the collision course for me, like River Falls is on with De Pere, and like Medford's on with Alaska, excuse me. That's St. Croix Central and Cameron, and that's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. It's gonna be the biggest game either of those groups of athletes have ever played in.
Yep, and that's fun until that one of them wins, and then they're gonna play in a bigger game the following week.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would agree with E3.
And I wanted your opinion on, like, as coaches, we saw Racine St. Kate's on the horizon last year. Not as a team that we, as much as we want to believe every game is ours to win, not a team that maybe we believed we were going to face. But a team that you think about facing in a hypothetical situation, and you go, yep, not good.
Yep.
And
they lost their first game. Like they lost because they had dudes.
Right. Right. But if
they beat Northwestern 2 years ago, they running clocked them at Madison. And the week before, Northwestern beat the brakes off of St. Croix Central in the sectional final. And so there's a different level to that. You may argue that Racine St. Kate's could beat any team in the state, or put them at least with any team in the state, including Onalaska, including River Falls.
Yep.
So that's to me, they're at a different level.
The one thing that will be interesting, and it'll be tons of fun to watch, is if the eventual state, if Summer or St. Croix Central rather were to win the sectional final and then win their semifinal, Coach Randy Jordan has seen every level of athlete on the basketball court, period, in high school and in college. What's going to be hit? Because it's reasonable to think he's watched. I mean, he coached high level college basketball, and obviously, Racine St. Kate's has high level college basketball players. But it's like it'll be interesting to see because he's not a guy that's going to be shaking in his boots. He's going to be realistic, I'm sure, with himself. because he's a good coach. But it'll be interesting to see how he attacks that and how St. Croix Central attacks that, because they put pressure on everybody and they turn everybody over. But if he would kind of take some time to prepare and pull something out of his bag of tricks, him and his co-head coach, but that'll be fun to maybe, a lot of things got to go right for Central.
He would take the air out of the ball,
right,
and he would try to make it a 30 possession game.
Right.
It's 100% what he would do, because that's what he tried to do against Prescott last year. He would go 4 corners offense, and get the ball to Seiler and try to get him to, keep the count off, and then return to the corner. And then, they tried it. Yeah, they tried it unsuccessfully against Prescott last year in the sectional semi. Yeah. And then the game, Prescott got ahead, so they had to kind of turn things up. But I would guess that he would try to play that. If he tries to play a 90 possession game against Racine St. Kate's, it's not going to go well.
Yep.
But he's smart enough and experienced enough that he'll come up with something to try to maximize their opportunity to win the basketball game.
Yeah, it's exciting.
All right, moving on. D4.
Yeah.
Do you have any games highlighted on your schedule there?
I think it's what's the word for it? What's the phrase for it? I think it's just going to be a crash course to Clear Lake, Fall Creek. And I think Clear Lake's really good. But I think this might be Fall Creek's year. They've got some really impressive athletes. Clear Lake could very well beat them. This is not like a St. Croix Central Cameron take. But I do believe if I were to have to put money on it, I would put money on Fall Creek. They've got some length and some strength in some of their athletes that I don't know if Clear Lake has. Clear Lake's obviously very, very good. They've got a guard in Blanchard who's really good at distributing, and they've got a kind of a swing small forward, power forward, and Peterson that's obviously very good at scoring. But Fall Creek's got some dudes. I think your nephew would attest to that. And I think they could make a trip to Madison or obviously whatever place they would go to. And that's really the only one in D4 for me.
I would throw Edgar in that mix.
You think so?
Yeah, Edgar's 17-2. They started off the year 4-0, then lost 2 out of 3. Haven't lost a game since January 4th. One of their losses was a 23-point loss to Medford, who is one of the better D2 teams. They've beaten some smaller schools. Obviously beaten some schools that I don't think there's a lot of common opponents with other teams. But I would throw Edgar in there, but I think Clear Lake would be the team that I favor to come out of there. But yeah, Fall Creek could certainly make some noise, and there's three teams to me that are better than the rest. But you never know with Hurley either, because they're so far north and their schedule is such a mismatch of teams that I think all 4 of those number 1 seeds have a chance to come out. But it's hard to sleep on anybody with 2 seeds could come out of there just as easy. So I would probably lay money on one of the 3 that we talked about being the team to represent Section 1. But it could be more wide open than we give credit for, just because of how teams put their schedules together. And now you've had some of the D4 teams move up to D3, some of the D5 teams move up to D4, that you might not have that game on your schedule that you would have if you would have known that this was your region or your section, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that Clear Lake, Fall Creek, Edgar are the favorites in D4.
Yeah. And I think D5 for me, it's pretty straightforward once again. I think Turtle Lake's a nice team. But until McDonald Central's strategy, and it's not even a strategy, I don't know if it's a strategy, but it's what the reality has been, is we're going to play in the Clover Belt a very good conference for that D kind of pseudo low D3, D4 size school. And then we're going to go to D5 and we're going to play teams that look a lot like JVs to us. And it's just been the reality. And for 2.5, maybe, 2-ish years, Luck was a team that could say up, straight up that we can hang with you. And last year would have been unbelievable to see that, match up, I think. Because obviously McDonald did get the best of Luck when Johansson and Jensen, the older Jensen, were juniors. But the reason I do mention Turtle Lake is we've seen them play. They have some strength that smaller schools don't often have. They have, I think their best player would be a guy that's got, a frame that you don't always see in a D5 bracket. But McDonald Central, until they prove me wrong, it's like what Rice Lake's going to have happen. I think is they're gonna go into a varsity gym and go okay, yeah, this should be fun.
Yeah, and maybe I'm just missing them, but is Eau Claire Emmanuel Lutheran?
So they must be.
They're a team that's 13-2.
They're very good.
They lost to the McDonald Central by only 4. They lost to Blair Taylor by 11, but I don't see them on the bracket.
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere. They're a ranked D5 team unless they got moved into another section. They don't have a playoff game listed on their schedule. Oh, they're in section 3.
Okay.
So, I mean, as far as local teams go, yeah, they're in a section with like Independence and Almapep and Gilmanton. But yeah, I think you're right about that, about Central. So the game that I'm kind of interested in is Turtle Lake plays Luck on Thursday.
Oh yeah.
And then they play again potentially in the regional final. And probably not going to match up to McDonald Central, but team, we saw Luck earlier this year, and they haven't been great, but they have some good players, and Turtle Lake obviously beat Baldwin Woodville. We watched that game, so just teams that we're more familiar with. I know you'll be pulling for Prairie Farm to pull a couple upsets and make their way.
Yeah. No, they're. I think the boys' trajectory is pretty steady. But I'm all about Prairie Farm, the girls program right now. They got a real shot, and that's exciting.
Okay.
Mostly because I know. Yeah, but
yeah, let's talk about the girls bracket just briefly.
Sure.
Did you look at any games on that? Okay, so D1.
You
let's
go for it.
D1.
Yep.
The D1 game that I marked would be Hudson's the team there that we'll be most interested in, and their potential matchup with De Pere sometime during the sectionals. That's the one that I'll be looking forward to, because Hudson is, I think, the premier team in our area.
Yeah.
You have anything to add to that?
No, I would agree. Hudson has convincingly taken care of all business this season, to the point where it's like startling. So, I mean, we've seen some really good girls basketball in Prescott, St. Croix Falls, and Hudson. I think they beat Prescott by a lot, and St. Croix Falls did as well. But it's like I just don't know if anybody can hang with Hudson. And obviously De Pere, I don't know anything about them, so they must have a good thing going over there basketball wise.
Yeah, for sure.
Both boys and girls.
Moving down to D2, I'm really excited to watch our girls play Somerset. We got better of them at home. They got better of us at their place. I think both teams on the right night have a chance to upset Nourishment. And I don't think really there's a anybody that stands out in section 1. In section 4 of D2, which is not at all our section, section 4, region C has 4 of the top 10 teams according to WISports coaches poll. Like Catholic Memorial, I think is ranked 9th, and they're the 4 seed. So that's just going to be a bloodbath with New Berlin, Eisenhower, Pewaukee, New Berlin West, and then Catholic Memorial. You're looking at what could be state semifinal and state final happening in the second and third round.
Yeah, that's super interesting, actually. That's
But
cool.
other than that, not overly, heavy towards any one region or section. Moving down to D3, find anything intriguing there?
I'm interested in Barron. I know that they're the school district that's had a little bit of success in basketball through the years. Like maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago, they were in a sectional final with Coach. His name escapes me, right? Baumgard, for boys, and so I think this is a Barron's girls team that maybe could be along the same lines as that. Maybe make a run. Prescott's really good, but Aquinas is really, really, really good. So it's like, this Prescott team should absolutely believe that they can do it. But that's a tough regional matchup.
Yeah, and St. Croix Falls Unity.
Yeah.
I mean, Unity is a very good team. St. Croix Falls is just a cut above.
Yeah, it's a good section. It's a really good section for D3.
It's a very good section, but I think your big game is going to be Aquinas Prescott in a regional final, and your other big game is going to be St. Croix Falls and Unity in a regional final. And St. Croix Falls will probably beat them pretty handily. And then you're going to throw in potentially a team like Barron and Neilsville, and they're going to be 3 and 4, and Aquinas and St. Croix Falls are going to beat both those teams. And then you're going to see Aquinas St. Croix Falls going to state, and as good as St. Croix Falls has been last year and this year, probably just going to run into the right team at the wrong time and come up for a game both times. So I would guess Aquinas is the team that's going to come out of there, but I would really hope that either first Prescott or second St. Croix Falls could knock them out, because when it comes to public versus private, I pull public.
Yeah, absolutely. And for D4, I don't have much to say. Whenever I see the word Edgar, I just assume there's a W following it. So I would maybe say Edgar takes care of business. But not a ton there for me. Obviously, Fall Creek is a 1 seed, which is good for their basketball program, having 2 1 seeds in their boys and girls. But
yeah, I had for D4 games to watch in both boys and girls, Fall Creek versus Clear Lake. And one might be a sectional semi, one might be a sectional final, but Fall Creek, Clear Lake, and I think I heard that Clear Lake just got beat by, Somerset pretty handily. I think last night or recently. So that to me would be a game to watch. But now let's get to your D5 preview.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. I mean, it's all things Panthers. It's all things green and gold. I've bled green and gold for a long time. I've got a vintage Prairie Farm jacket that I'll be wearing around Baldwin for the next couple weeks. It's cool because me and you actually both kind of had a maybe a little perspective into this when we were close with when we were talking to Ty every day. Right. And Clayton's Girls is really good. Is that Hoosier the movie Hoosiers? Those kind of towns still very much exist, and in the sense that yes, the world's a different place, but there are communities where the community waits for teams like maybe this year's Prairie Farm team or Clayton's girls teams of old, a couple of years ago. And it's truly a community event every time. And that's pretty cool. And I think that can be said for a lot of, smaller school sports, but, obviously they're the team that I'm going to be pulling for. They're young. They're very talented, but they're very young. So, if they were to lose, it wouldn't surprise me just because we've watched. I mean, we watched on Friday, and all credit to BW with beating Prescott, but sometimes sophomores and freshmen have sophomore and freshman kind of nights,
Right.
yeah, particularly freshmen, right? It's a different level of young adult or young person, right? It's an adolescent sometimes versus a young adult, and so. But no, I can't wait to pull for the Panthers and continue to communicate with my grandma and aunt and other people in that community that care a lot, and have it would mean a lot to a lot of people if they could represent the little place that Prairie Farm is, because it's quite small. But
Do you think they
yeah,
have
it's
a
exciting.
Do you think they have a shot against McDonald Catholic Central?
I don't know. I don't know. It's a good question. The reason that I would be more optimistic is because Prairie Farm's drills, they've just been drilling people. If they were to be maybe more competitive, kind of like when we talked about Clear Lake and St. Croix Central, or not Clear Lake, sorry, Cameron, where you're talking about, Cameron winning some closer games against competition that's not, because Prairie Farm's been putting points up in scores. I mean, just kind of hammering people. It gives me hope that maybe their talent is kind of out of place for their conference and that they can compete. But once again, um, McDonald Central is just it's they've got to prove us. They would have to, yeah. They would. I mean,
It's theirs to win or theirs to lose.
always for boys and girls, it's always going to be until somebody proves them wrong.
Yep. All right. Well, that was about 40 minutes of WIAA 2021 playoff preview. Um, we'll have some more free nights. Obviously, we have a girls game to stream this later this week, potentially another one the next night if the chips fall the right way, and then a boys game the following week, but probably won't get an opportunity to host a second. So hopefully we'll find a time next week where we can look at how these teams have done in the regions, or the boys teams, how they've done coming into the regionals, which would start a week from tonight. So one more time, this was the Western Wisconsin Sports Podcast. I'm Jeremy Nygaard. That's Jordan Lehman, and we're going to sign off. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.